I have my oldest son, Cameron. The one who's in the middle is Henri, and the baby is Cohen Samuel. And of course, this is our holiday picture that was taken. I think Henri was 6 and Sammy was 3. And Cameron was getting ready to college and then went to the military. Next slide. This is a picture of my children when the day after they were taken into custody. They were taken into custody due to a complaint. Of course, both children are on the spectrum, and I was a single mother. At the time, their father had passed. Their father passed in 2010. And so I'm a single mother. I received benefits, survival benefits for my son, and they were technically disabled based on their autism. Next slide. When they were taken into custody, of course, the first thing I started doing was a diary, a daily diary. I would document everything. And let me encourage mothers who are going through this to document everything, because a lot of things that don't make sense will ultimately make sense once you read into the diary. I want to let you know that 10 to 15 minutes is not enough time to compile 4 years of litigation and trauma and psychosis that was bestowed upon my family as a result of being a client of DSS. I encouraged the panel to consider having or requesting that Department of Health and Human Services, the National Institute of Health, and the Center for Disease Control and Prevention do a medical study for the families that have been going through this process. Of course, because of the crimes that are committed against the children while in DSS care, we are actually going to need a special prosecutor to unload those files, to take a look in and find out what is needed to be done to get justice for the crimes that are committed against the children within DSS custody. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is the first email that I got letting me know that there was a problem with Henri. I knew that there was a problem, but this was the sinker. They had taken him into the ER. And of course, the first thing I did was run there, and they would not let me see him. They would not let me talk to him. Of course, that was the first of many instances. Next slide. So the doctor had documented, this is his medical record, that of course that he had run away several times and he wanted to be home with his mother. That is on his medical record, but that never made it to court. Okay. So that's where we are. They documented his concerns, but never to my benefit. All right. Next slide, please. So here in my diary, I documented the fact that Henri had gone to Central Regional Hospital. He had gone to Duke Emergency Room several times and back to Central Regional. What happened, what we ultimately found out is that Henri had been repeatedly raped and beaten by one of the occupants in his foster home, in his therapeutic foster home, okay? And of course, by me presenting that information to the county and to the caseworker and to everyone else, they didn't want to receive it. He actually ran away. He jumped out of a second-story window, walked 5 miles in the dark to get to me, to tell me what had been occurring and why he was going through what he was going through under the custody of DSS. Next slide, please. Ultimately, Henri was sent to Springbrook Behavioral Health Center in South Carolina, Travelers Rest, which is an 8-hour trip, round trip. So on Sundays, I would travel 8 hours round trip to spend 2 hours with my son. That would not show commitment. That is not enough commitment. Well, maybe it is, because what they ended up doing is terminating my visit, saying that I was too much of a disruptance at the facility. And basically what it turned out to be is that the facility decided they were not going to provide the supervision needed or required by the court order. They could not facilitate it. They needed to have a caseworker from Durham or some other agency to come supervise. And of course, because they never authorized a caseworker, my visits were terminated. And so I had to leave him there at Springbrook. Next slide, please. And as a result of the report that Henri provided to me, I did report it to the Durham Police Department. I reported it to the Durham County Sheriff's Department after the police department said that the incident occurred in the county. So I have two agencies that I have documented my concerns and the experiences and the detail that I was given about the incident. But of course, their job at that point was to investigate, and that investigation never occurred. And next slide, please. So I want you to look at this picture. This is the picture of Henri in 2016 when he was advertised for adoption for US kids. And of course, he is 16 years old in that picture. Next slide. Okay, so this is a picture of Henri when I actually located him. I located him by accident. And I drove to Scotland County, which is 100 miles from me, and I rode up on him on the basketball field, on the basketball court, playing basketball. I did not recognize him, but he recognized me, and he said, "Mom." And that was all I needed to hear. He recognized me. Next slide, please. After several years of wrangling with DSS, whether or not he was adopted, whether or not he was a foster kid, whether or not he was having these issues or those issues, he finally returned home. This is his first picture home. This is his first day home. Okay. And at that time, he was 20. He was brave enough to walk away from the DSS custody when he was able to compare the life of being at home with his loving family and being in foster care. Next slide, please. When he returned home and advised his foster family that he would not be returning, they packed up his things in garbage bags. They packed everything but the main thing that he needed, which was this medication that he needed. So he actually went 4 weeks without medication. Next slide, please. So this is the medication list. These pharmaceuticals are high octane prescriptions. Most of them require a taper down. Henri did not have the pleasure of tapering down. He went without. And so since he went without, we realized that he just never went back on those medications. Next slide, please. And this particular prescription says, don't incorporate this medication with other medications, and give you a whole list of medical issues that this one prescription could cause. And I want to let you know that he was actually on 4 to 5 medications. Next slide, please. In addition to the other 2 medications, he was on these 2 as well. And so he was medicated and he was docile, and he was more catatonic. He was obedient, and he was emerging 6 feet. So he had to be managed, and the medication was to manage him. And so that was their way. Next slide, please. So once Henri returned home, I did contact the Sheriff's Department and let him know that he had been home and he was ready to give his statement, and if they could send an investigator to take his statement, in which they did. They did let the investigator come and take the statement, and said that they would get back in touch with me. And of course, I'm reaching out to them, trying to figure out what's going on now. How can they move this issue? But the district attorney's office said that they weren't going to prosecute. There was not enough evidence. So basically what I did is, okay, well, refer it to the SBI or refer it to the FBI, because they sent him out of state. He should be going to the FBI. And I believe the reason that they moved him out of state was to obstruct justice. But technically, the investigators could have gone to South Carolina. They often do go state to state. But I think because of the interference and the allegations, they purposely did not do it, because they were asked not to, for the reputation of the county. Okay, next slide, please. So after much back and forth wrangling to and fro, trying to get the sheriff to put in a request for SBI and the district attorney to put in a request for FBI to investigate the interference and the obstruction of justice on the side of DSS, the the sheriff blocked me. And he will tell you, if you call him today and ask him, could you please explain why you blocked Ms. Hawes? Oh, I'm an elected official. I can't block. We don't have the ability to block citizens. But don't let your lying eyes fool you. There it is right there. But the good news is, and that's at the end of the slide. Thank you so much. The good news is that he is back with me. He's doing well. He is actually in school. He is working at Amazon. He's been working at Amazon Distribution Center for 2 years, and he is doing well. He is moving into his adult life, but I still have Sam. I'm still fighting to unseal the adoption for Sam. And that has been just another beast in itself. The fact that Sam is 18 is not sufficient for DSS to contact and let him know that we are there for him. It's not sufficient. And I went to the county just this week, and they said, I have to hire an attorney to file a motion, but that does not mean that the file will be unsealed. So I'm fighting a
Excuse me,
whole
Ms.
nother
Hawes.
battle. Yes.
You have 2 minutes left in your testimony.
Okay, thank you. So I'm fighting a whole nother battle as we speak to get Sam access to Sam, to let him know that we are an option for him. And of course, the Durham County Clerk's Office is giving us much resistance. And there is a question as to whether there is a protocol and what the protocol is. But of course, for me, I feel like the protocol is obstruction. But of course, now at this point, I have to find an attorney to get a motion submitted to request the adoption unsealed. And that is my story.
Thank you very much for your time here and your remarks. Our next presenter will be Marcella Middleton.
Thank you so much. My name is Marcella Middleton, and I just want to thank you all for giving me the opportunity to share. To be quite honest, I'm a little nervous because I feel like it's hard to give a perspective on this. And when you just understand that there's so much of a complexity in all of this. I spent time in foster care from the age of 2, and I aged out at 21 years old. I was in and out, so I know my family. There's 5 of us, kids, and I'm number 4. I have a lot of like horror stories in terms of my experience being in foster care, as well as like not being in foster care. And I feel like when I think about Ryland's Law, there was many a times that Ryland's Law would have been helpful for me because I went back into my home space when it just wasn't right for me. And the fact that I had to end up aging out of the foster care system and figuring things out for myself, I feel like speaks volumes to my experience. I think a lot of times the system tries to make sure that, especially when I was younger, I could feel that the system was trying to make sure that they gave my mom an opportunity. And she was struggling with 5 kids and just trying to make ends meet. And she had her own woes. And I hate like to make it seem like I'm throwing her under the bus because I do love my mom. But the reality is that she wasn't fit for us when we were kids growing up because there was a lot of drug abuse, there was domestic violence, there was abuse of us as children and just other people that were in the home. We experienced abuse from them. And so a lot of times when we were placed in foster care and then placed back, it was, of course, I think it was just to make sure that the family was together. But then we ended up back in foster care each time. Like every single time I went home, we went back and was for another issue, whether it was like, abuse or drugs or like domestic violence between her and my stepdad. And so it's just really difficult. And a lot of times my mom missed the gaps of development for us. So that was hard for her as well. But again, like those weren't things that were addressed. And when I think about Ryland's Law addressing like the time that you spend with your children, like those documented visits that you have with your children before, just to kind of make sure that, things are okay. While I definitely think that there can be more support to make sure that those visits are more thorough and more supportive of parents. Again, for me, like they would have helped me and my siblings as we were going back home, and absolutely helped either my mom figure out what she needed to be able to have a more successful reunification, or like let the social worker know what needed to be known to say, hey, this may not be a safe situation right now for whatever, for whatever safety reasons. And that just didn't happen. So I feel like there was a lot of tug of war in my life, whereas like I was in and out, in and out, in and out, in and out, in and out. And I get that it's hard to make a definite like a decision about like, oh, the kids need to be out, right? Because we've heard stories here, we're hearing stories about how difficult that is. But again, just like that back and forth, and not having the thorough insight to what I needed at that time made it really difficult. My story is not unique to just me. This is the story of young people that I work with currently now who are experiencing this. And, either they're stuck in the system, or when they go back, it's not thorough enough. So they're ending up back in the system because, people are not looking at the incidents that are happening. And, like I said, I don't want to make my mom look like a monster, right, by sharing the things that she went through, because she had her own struggles. But those were things that impacted me and my siblings' lives very heavily, like using drugs, fighting the abuse, the way that she navigated certain situations were just not helpful towards us. And I knew that. The older I got, the more I realized that like my mom, for whatever reasons, was not investing in my future. And, a lot of times we just say like singularly thought things like, oh, let's send the kids back home and it'll be fine because they're with their families. Well, in my situation, my mom was not trying to make sure I was going to college. My mom was not trying to make sure that my development was on par based on all of the things that I went through. And if I would have stayed with her, I know for a fact that I would have just been another statistic that everybody can look at and just be like, just laugh me or judge me into a dark hole. And I don't think that's fair. I don't think that's fair for any of the young people that I work with and I serve, to have to deal with that. Because the older you get, the less empathy people have for you. They are not if you're falling behind on certain things, people are not going to say, hey, let me know if you were in foster care. I can give you a, hand up with this light bill. It's like, no, like they're going to be like, you need to pay this light bill. Like, I don't care what you went through. You need to pay this light bill. So there's a lot less empathy for us. And being in foster care gave me the opportunity to go to college, get my degree. I had a leg up in life, so that now I'm functioning in life in a way that I feel like is reflective of me and what I deserve and what now my kids deserve. And it's all because people gave me a chance. It's social services giving me a chance. It wasn't the perfect situation. I had a lot of really rough experiences in foster care, but still, like being at home, it's like being in vain, at home, because again, my mom was not contributing to those things. And again, I am one of many young people across this state who don't have parents who are putting us first and prioritizing us and thinking about us outside of whatever it is that they're doing that's causing unsafe experiences. Because people don't just take, my experience in being a social worker now too, you can't just be taking people's kids because you don't like them. I'm sure people have had those experiences. However, a lot of times, like, you can't convince a judge, hey, I just don't like this person, so I'm just going to take them. Plus it's, there's a whole bunch to that, but it's difficult. So I think what's important here that I just want to be clear about is, again, not to throw my mom under the bus, but just be real about my experience and the experience of many young people who are in the system and how vulnerable we are. And so those who are, over us, it's important for you all, as you're making decisions in terms of policy or even just practices, that as it pertains to young people, thinking about all the other young people who don't have the parents who are in the spaces that they need to be and doing the things that they need to be doing for us, and how we continue to go back into those spaces and we're experiencing the same things that we were taken for in the first place, that were unsafe, whether they were neglectful behaviors, abusive behaviors, or whatever those things were, what we were being exposed to. Those are things that have long lasting effects. So I think just having the piece in Ryland's Law that calls for accountability, I think is really important. So yeah, that's about all I have. But I just want to thank you all for offering this opportunity for me to share my experience, but my experience on the behalf of other young people as well across the state. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Middleton, for taking the time. You didn't sound nervous, even if you were, so you did a great job. Thank you very much. Our next speaker is, I'm sorry, Yolanda Rushing. You have the floor.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Yolanda Rushing, and I am here today to share a personal testimony that highlights issues I've encountered with DSS. My aim is to shed light on the challenges my family has faced and to be a voice for my children and other families who have been unfairly treated or silenced by this system. To society, I was a product of a single Black mother. But to my family and myself, I'm a veteran, educated, married Black Native American woman, but most importantly, a mother. Yet, as of today, 1 year, 13 days, and counting, my husband and I continue to fight for our children because we love, miss, and want our children home. DSS will tell you otherwise. I thought this was an agency who looks out for the best interests and welfare of children. Calling DSS, I made a regrettable decision that I will have to live for the rest of my life and explain to my children why I brought DSS into our lives. At my home, my family comes together, eats together, laugh, share stories, ask each other how everyone's day is going, sets the table together, play our favorite games like I Spy and made up games where we toss up a letter and spill out as many words as we can. These are the stories my home can tell, the life lessons, the values and morals learned and instilled in our home. I did what the law mandated me to do, to report. But I soon realized it was unwanted welcome for DSS to be in my home. What I'm about to testify to relates to real life situation, Jonathan Guzet. Please don't take my testimony lightly. It takes courage, boldness, and strength for each of us to share our family's personal journey. To Miss Antoinette, you're right on point. It is a lot to put in 12 minutes. I have experienced and witnessed some unimaginable things at the hands of DSS, where my family, along with other families, were silenced, shunned, retaliated against, and left alone, trapped in a system to save and mend their broken families. My reported incident took 8 months for CPS to investigate. During this time, I had private counsel, yet an ex parte hearing was held on the morning of August 7th, 2023, and by 11:47 a.m., I arrived home in time to kiss and hug my children and to tell them to remember to pray and be brave. By noon, my husband and I walked into an empty home. The judge that signed our order was not supposed to sign orders of this type because his daughter was the county's garden ad litem administrator. However, this judge signed our order, and his daughter was assigned to our case. The 7 day hearings where parents are given the opportunity to contest why the removal is not necessary is disheartening. During my second 7 day hearing, the hearing lasted no more than 7 minutes. Yet, a court report produced over 8 pages long. Guardian ad litems are encouraged to advocate against continuances, yet our case was continued more than 5 times. Social workers miss our children's appointments, yet they will use that against parents as neglect. CFT meetings where families come to discuss a case plan, the agency doesn't even involve the parents with creating the goals for reunification, which is the number one goal, but quick to suggest adoption as the immediate alternative. Nor do they inform you to bring your family and community support network to advocate on your behalf. These are things you have to learn along the way. Parents are not informed of their rights during this process. They are prematurely stripped of their rights the day the children are removed. DSS believes they can make all the decisions regarding our children prior to adjudication on their own. They do not tell you the case plans are optional unless a judge orders them, but yet they force and coerce you into completing one. Ryland's Law was designed to improve oversight in child custody cases. According to an article dated June 29th, 2017, in the Raleigh News and Observer, the article quotes, "This law aimed to create regional partnerships in which county social services agencies will help each other, required a state to hire a contractor to review the statewide social services system, shorten the time given for parents to appeal a custody decision, and establish a pilot program for youth in foster care to obtain a driver's license." Senator Barringer, in the same article, quoted, "Within about 2 years, two, we should have a system that is accountable, transparent, and delivers high quality standard care to everyone in this state." Well, Tamra, it has been 7 years, and we are just now implementing regional partnerships. Why is my husband and I still awaiting for an order from July 8th, 2024, so that we can appeal an A&D decision? There's no need to rebut the rest. Families, for a jury to convict a criminal, the prosecutor has to present clear and convincing, overwhelming evidence, what we call a beyond reasonable doubt. However, to remove a child from a home, the agency has to present preponderance of the evidence, demonstrating that the proposition is more likely true than not true, enough to persuade that the agency's claim is more likely true than not. Criminals have more protections than parents. The state informs you to file a complaint, but when you follow up, they hide the results of their investigation under the guise of children's privacy. If an agency is violating laws, not adhering to policies, why are taxpayers not privy to such information? How can an agency that doesn't adhere to policy invade the child's privacy? How can an agency override family court matters? Make it make sense for me. How did we get here, North Carolina? Despite the challenges, I will continue to fight. I was raised by a strong, independent woman and a grandmother who taught me to pray. I will not stop advocating for the children in this state and for the changes needed in this system. The current state of affairs reveals a system in desperate need of change. It's time to address the sweeping issues within CPS and ensure that children are not treated as commodities, but are given the fair and compassionate treatment they deserve. The moral of my testimony: Be careful who you invite into your home. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. We will now go into 5-minute break. And before we break, I would just like to say as a reminder, we will go into Q&A for our committee members. Please refrain from making comments during the question and answer period. We will go into our business meeting immediately after the panelist discussion. Any comments we will be glad to hear and share at that point. Again, we will go into a 5-minute break. It is 2:06, and we can all be back at 2:11. Thank you. Brianna, are we back reporting?
Recording in progress.
Thank you. Do we have our committee members back and ready to begin our Q&A session? I can't see everyone.
Yes, everyone's here. You're ready.
Thank you. Thank you. Welcome back. We're now going into our Q&A session. I will use the roll call and invite committee members to participate. Each committee member will have the opportunity to ask one question. As time allows, I will go down the roll again in case committee members have follow-up questions. I ask members to keep your questions brief to allow for sufficient response times. Please focus on questions and not statements at this time. As I previously mentioned, we will have time to debrief testimony during our committee meeting, where comments will be more appropriate to share at that time. Members of the public will not be invited to ask questions of the panelists. And I will begin. And I have a question. Is Ms. Middleton still on the line?
Yes.
Yes, I wanted to ask you, discussed having 18 to 21-year-old. Is that a program that you recommend, and that is something that it sounded like did help you along the way?
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, when I talk to all the young people that I work with, I encourage them like all to consider the foster care 18 to 21 program. In my experience in the foster care 18 to 21, in terms of where I was living when I was in that program, it was not all like perfect, but it was stable. And I was able to consistently focus on school and work because I had a stable environment where there wasn't fighting, somebody asking me for my money all the time, or, trying to ask me for irrational things. So yeah, I would absolutely recommend the foster care 18 to 21. And I'm actually doing some advocacy work on the federal level to make that a policy that's extended to all young people across the country, because North Carolina is lucky and wonderful that we have that program here, but there's so many states that don't have that for the young people in their states. So yeah.
Thank you very much. I will call on Daniel Bose.
Thanks, Chair Wright. Let me start by thanking everybody who gave testimony today. I can't, as somebody who talks in public, I've never had to talk. I rarely talk as a impacted person, and that's the hardest of all. So, we heard some really helpful testimony today, and it took a lot for y'all to give that to us. So thank you for that. My question is, there's some reliance generally in the law in an adversarial system to hold institutions and people and decision makers accountable. And so, but it sounded like from the testimony here that often there is no sort of adversarial atmosphere between judges, the agency, GAL, the parent, and so I'm hoping people can comment on that. was there adversarial? Was anybody of the people I mentioned, where did you see people holding each other accountable in a judicious way? Just anything comment you can have that would shed light on why there isn't more clear just adversarial sort of engagement between the decision makers. Thank you.
If you would like, I'd like to take a first stab at that question. So if you look at the news clipping, and I want to end up sending the entire clipping and everything in my testimony to the committee as well. I went to the powers that be. You know, they tell you to speak to your county commissioners because they are the ones who have the oversight. They tell you to talk to your county manager. My wife and myself have spoke to the county managers at least on 2 occasions. Unfortunately, these people don't want to address the issue. They want to turn their back on the issues. I've even contacted the Department of Justice, no answers. So you talk to these people who are at these high positions who can make change, but unfortunately, they close doors on them. And it's very hard to communicate. In my case, in April, because I mentioned names of the workers who were involved in our case, I was escorted out. Now, keep in mind, there's other individuals who have been doing this for years and years and years, but I was the one who was chosen to get escorted out and banned for county commissioner meetings for 90 days.
Thank you.
All right, Ms. Ewing, Ms. Rushing, I'm sorry. Ms. Middleton?
Yolanda, you're muted.
Okay. I apologize. I was letting Ms. Halls go, but I will answer that question for you, Daniel. It's not adversarial, you know, amongst the judges and attorneys. They go to lunch together. They meet afterwards. Court hearings and court sessions to talk about these cases is not a secret. But yet, and still, you're not going to find one that's willing to step up and speak up and say, this is wrong. This is what we're doing wrong. And then what you have is a family trying to advocate for their children in this web of, you have to go here to file a complaint. You got to go to DSS to file a complaint. And then you got to try to go to the county managers. Well, guess what? The DSS is contracted by the county commissioners and the county manager. They were supposed to work together. Then you have the judges. Again, you're allowing parents to fight for their children in the best interest of their child, all on the basis of an agency and in the county level, because the state doesn't want the accountability. The judges do not want the accountability. And that is sad because we are talking about children.
Thank you.
If I may,
Yes, please.
I filed complaints all the way up to the state. I filed with the county, I filed with the state, I filed with the federal, I filed with law enforcement, I filed with Health and Human Services, I filed with commissioners, I filed with the judges, and like they said, they are colleagues and they work together for the best interest of the children. But I don't think it's for the best interest of the children. I think it's a financial issue, which would actually classify this whole quantum as a RICO case, because I feel like they're all being compensated at the misery of the client. And I just feel like maybe, I'm trying to unraise my hand. I just feel like it's deliberate, and there is a consequence. For every time that I filed a complaint, there was one more slap in the face. One more slap in the face. And every time I reached out and connected, I actually had some SBI investigators actually show up at DSS in the lobby. They came at my visit. but they came and one of them recognized me and knew my partner, my children's father who had passed, was a community corrections officer, and he knew us. And he was shocked and amazed that he didn't acknowledge that he was there for my complaint, but he acknowledged that he knew me and my partner and was familiar with us. And that's the most I think that we got. I never heard what the result was from that inquiry. It was actually three state officers who actually came to DSS to inquire about our case.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Earn.
Thank you. I would like to actually say my case, I have similarities between Miss, I don't know how to pronounce her name. Can I say Antoinette? And then Rushington, her and her husband. My case actually started in 2017. Well, I was harassed between 2014 to 2017 due to medical malpractice and negligence. In 2017, when the mold started, I had just given birth to my youngest child, and my oldest son had just been permitted to start his physical therapy after a 12 to 18 months recovery on his surgery from the medical malpractice birth injury. So in 2017, we was forced into the apartment. That's when I found the mold and everything. And basically what happened was I got an email from the caseworker on Work First, which is the second floor, the floor right below CPS. And they had asked me if I was coming to the Work First so I can start up the financial support for my second child. I was already getting financial support for my first child. And I told her, yes, I had physical therapy appointments and I had newborn appointments. Well, she said, can you tell me why you did miss your appointment? I let her know that I found mold and I had to find a safe place for my children. Next thing you know, CPS started coming. I was accused of neglecting my children's appointments, but yet I have papers to prove that that was completely false. I contacted the SBI like Miss Antoinette. And I also, I wasn't calling to complain. She asked why I wasn't there. So I was honest with her. I'm a very honest person. Only missed one appointment at Work First. And I feel as if keeping my children from that mold rather than going to go sign up for some financial support at the time was just more important, just in the sense of a crisis and emergency. I was willing to reschedule. She sent CPS out there, and that's when the false statements began in the petition. Now, this is where I say they conspired together. The judges refused to look at any of the evidence. At the time, I did not have the paperwork, I'm gonna be honest. However, when I went in there, I said, you can come in there and you can find the mold, you can smell it. I had pictures of my child vomit. He actually had McDonald's, but the smell in the apartment alone would cause you to get sick. I would get lightheaded and I feared that it would affect my infant. So I packed up bags and I went and lived with my aunt to protect not only my children from the mold, but myself. They refused to investigate the mold. They automatically said I was mentally ill. The court never took any of my defense arguments. And as far as the appointed counsels, they work for the court and they work side by side with CPS. I have emails of me telling the attorneys that was supposed to represent me, is there any way we can subpoena experts about the mold? Is there any way that we can subpoena experts about them saying that I'm mentally ill, about my son's concerns about his medical issues? They overlooked all of that. Then in 2022, after I had pieced together all the evidence to go to trial, everything was ignored and neglected, and even the defense attorneys who were supposed to represent me were negligent. Basically, what they did was they came to court, and the prosecutor didn't even have her mental health filed against me to prove that she found that I was mentally ill. She asked for extended continuance, and the judge granted her with that. When I asked for a continuance to go seek counsel, private counsel, or hire a private attorney versus her getting a granted extension, they denied me. I was denied before she got her continuance. So during that time frame, they were siding with the prosecution, but I was being deprived of all my civil rights. During the placement, I say I have the evidence that I'm not mentally ill and that the mole was in there, because petition said that the mole wasn't really in there. It was a form of my judgment being impaired and deficient. They said that no mole existed whatsoever. The court agreed with CPS, and my counsels did not protect my civil rights whatsoever. Furthermore, they did not protect my children. My children are in the system based on false claims, and I was denied any type of equal opportunity to provide the evidence to prove my innocence. To this day, no judge looked at it, including the evidence that I just posted in the slides with the text messages. She wouldn't even look at the evidence of the text messages of them calling my son niggas and refusing and neglecting my son's medical care. Not to mention the caseworker was included in those text messages for their protection. I'm sorry. I did block that out to protect their personal information. However, if you look at the originals, if I can send them to the commission, you would see that the caseworker, the foster caregiver, and myself was all joined in that message. So the caseworker was very aware that they called my sons niggas. She was very aware that the foster caregiver did ignore my son's medical care.
Thank you, Ms. Irwin. Thank you very much.
Welcome. I apologize.
That's okay. We understand your passion there. Ms. Middleton, if we can give you 5 minutes, we want to give our other committee members a chance to ask questions as well. So we do recognize that you've been patient and waiting.
Absolutely. Thank you. I will, yeah, so I would say, like, in agreement with what other folks have shared in terms of they don't, between social workers, judges, all that, like, they're close to each other. And from my experience, I experienced both, like, where they utilize those relationships to further harm, and then they've also used those relationships to help. I know at the time, not my social worker, my therapist, my social worker wanted to put me on the psychotropic medications, like similar to the ones that were mentioned here, was ready, because I don't know what it is, they be ready to throw us on some medication like it's nobody's business. And they were ready to put me on medication because they were saying that I was oppositional defiant because I was speaking up for myself. And my therapist actually, like, advocated for me that not happen. She's like, no, we don't need to do that at all. And I feel like that really saved my life, because as Miss Antoinette was sharing earlier, like, how that can really alter your whole personality. Like, when they put you on those psychotropic medications, it can really alter your whole being. And so I wouldn't even be the woman I am today if they would have put me on those psychotropic medications. So for her to hold the social worker accountable and be like, no, we don't need to do that. Those things do happen. But again, and I say that because there are people few and far between in the system that are accountable and will hold somebody's feet to the fire if they are, their friend or whoever within the work space. But I would be remiss if I wasn't honest about how they do go to lunch with each other. They be married too, and they're family members, and they also, they do that.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I will now call on Christopher Duggan for any questions you may have.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. I first want to thank everybody who gave presentations today. It truly is heartbreaking to hear your stories. Mr. Campbell, to see your son crying because he was hungry was truly heartbreaking. Ms. Middleton, if I could ask, because you are inside, right? Inside the system. So one of the things that we are charged with is to determine, is there a treatment of the minorities within the system different from others? For instance, did you ever experience, and we heard some of the stories about how from the others, but what have you experienced with the treatment of minorities within the system versus others?
Yeah, that's a good question. What they're saying is 100% fact. Like, even as a young person, I remember being in this professional development like course. And the way that the lady was explaining to us what was professional was, as I'm sitting here listening to her name things, she was naming everything about my blackness and all the other young people's blackness as no-nos in the professional realm. So like our whole identity was shattered right there in that moment. And if you can imagine, like, being a young person vulnerable, and especially being young and trying to figure out like who you are, you're not with your family, so you don't have a direct reflection of yourself in your household. You're with strangers. And so that's already confusing enough. And then to go in a space where they're trying to, I guess, train you up so that you can be successful in their eyes. And they're just like denoting everything that's naturally about you as being wrong. And even within, like, you can tell some of the kids that people are mostly want to like ride with. Like, I know for me, for instance, the first social worker that I had, she was scared of me. I mean, y'all hear my voice. It projects, baby. And so I think she felt like intimidated by that. So she wanted to ride with another social worker with me because she was scared of me. Like, and she clearly said that. And, like I went to this group home, and this is like, as I'm working with young people, I went to this group home, and it was two young Black girls. One young girl was a dark-skinned Black girl, and the other young girl was like me. She was a light-skinned Black girl. The light-skinned Black girl was more, hanging around like the white kids, because it was a majority white kids. It's like all the way in the mountains where it's like not a high. I think it was like 1% of Black people in this county. And so the light-skinned Black girl, she was like hanging out with more of the white kids and stuff like that. And then the Black girl, she was ousted. But if you look at what was going on, everybody was in there doing exactly what the Black girl like does, like all that, yeah, using on her lingo and all that. Everybody was like all on her culture and everything about her, but like she was ousted as an individual person. And you see that often. And another thing, that the last thing that I'll note about that is too, Miss Antoinette shared a picture of her son and on the adoption website. If you even just go sit up on them websites, you can see all the young Black people that have been up there for years and years and years. And a lot of time, like, we don't get, even now, the young people I work with, like, we don't get adopted. Like, we don't get adopted out. Like, a lot of the homes that we're in, they're not like, we don't get access to other homes that other young people get, if you catch my drift. Like, it's very much specific. So, and a lot of times people don't talk about that, but even our hair care was a big thing for me. I mean, I don't know, I'm crazy about this right here, because this was the only thing I could control when I was in foster care. I couldn't control nothing else, but this hair was what I could control. And when you're in the system, especially if you don't have the type of hair that can just take a shampoo and a blow dryer and you can go on about your day, like, it's really difficult, going into people's homes, and especially even asking like, hey, I actually need this type of hair care for myself, or hey, I need to use a do-rag because I need to cover my braids at night, or things like that. So you can see it's a stark difference in terms of treatment with children of color. And that's all colors. I'm Black, so I'm speaking from that experience. But of course, I've seen so many young people of other brown young people who have experienced that as well, especially if they're a part of Native American spaces and that's their identity. That's also a struggle as well as religion, because we live in North Carolina. It's a Bible Belt. A lot of homes are typically Christian. So I had a friend who was Muslim, and she was in a home, and baby, they struck her of all of that, and she had to become Christian. So it's similar in that regard too.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I will call on Marcus Gatson.
Thank you very much. And I also appreciate hearing everybody's stories. It strikes me that all of you, I think, have found, as Chris indicated, that there's a racial component to what you have experienced here. And so what I would like to hear from you is whether you perceived that that was more of a product of the individuals who handled your case, or to the extent that you could discern it, whether there were more systemic racial discrimination that was going on? And if you're going to tell me that you think it was systemic racial discrimination, I would love to hear what led you to that conclusion.
I'd like to start if I could. My
Please.
social worker was a white woman, and I am not a poor woman. I had just purchased a house. I spent $208,000 cash moving from one house to another. And she hated my hardwood floors. She hated my vaulted ceilings. And she let me know and made sure I understood that I was subjected to whatever she said. And I think that because I was not a poor woman, because I had a work history, because my children's father was a state employee and professional accredited law enforcement, I think the bomb was dropped on me because we were technically he and I were low level whistleblowers. I think that's where it all stems from. And when he passed, the veil was raised. And so, and that's where they pounced after he passed. But yes, she hated me. But when you consider the industry in itself, the judge was Black. The district attorney or the attorney, Miss Abney, she was Black. The GAL was a middle-aged white woman, and she just got paid. She just did whatever. She was the co-signer. But I think I suffered hideously under the social worker because she wanted to make sure I knew my place.
Thank you for that.
I'll go ahead and
Yes.
respond as well. I'll give two reasons as to why I think it's systemic. Originally, you will look at it like a retaliation because I would never forget the social worker investigator's expression on her face as she was sitting in the vehicle and I was saying goodbye to my children. It was that arrogant, cocky look that leaned back in the vehicle like, I got you. She never took the time to get out the vehicle to tell me why my children were taken, never said anything about anything. She was comfortable with what she had done and she was ready to go on her mission. The other component to that is once we received the evidence, we realized that she added things into the evidence, basically padding it. And she said that while I was here at the house, I was waving my hands. I was cursing people out. I was saying that I was going to sue. I was acting belligerent. You know, that's the stereotypical response for the Black woman that they see. But little did they know I'm also Native American. But if they followed policy and asked a question about Native American heritage, they would have known that. But even with me telling them that, it was, or them discovering that months later, it was basically prove your Native American heritage to us, like show us your culture. And it was trotted in court as if it was like, you can't be Native American. There's just no way. And if there is a way, you need to show us how you are. And so I would also say in ending, on my very first time of going to court, out of all the cases that were there that day, and the reason why I knew about the whole day is because the attorney stalled in court intentionally on that day. I was the only one with private counsel out of all the cases in that courtroom that day. There were no cases involving any white children. They were either Native American, African American, and Hispanic. Not one case, sir, was white. Not on my first 7-day hearing, and not on 2 other occasions when I went to court. So I believe it's systemic.
Thank you. Ms. Aaron?
Thank you. With my particular problem with that part, it was really both altogether. Everything, the poverty, the racism, and the fact that my son was injured at birth. First and foremost, they was upset because I was educated. I'm a Black woman who's educated enough to go file those civil suits. That's where it started at. And they wanted to hide the medical malpractice. So every time we would either get a step ahead within his medical treatment, or anytime we had a problem with a doctor, or anytime I had to file a civil complaint, they came to the door. I have the paperwork versus each visit from 2014 all the way up to 2017. So then once they took my kids, I was told that I'd never get my kids back. The problem with them actually violating our rights due to my financial status and my skin color, it was the fact that they took advantage of us being under Medicaid and being on HUD. To them, since we gave you this apartment, whether it's mold in it or not, you're going to live in it and you're not going to complain about it. So every time you complain, we're going to come out there and see you and your children and threaten to take your children from you. Every time you file a complaint due to medical negligence or medical malpractice, we're going to come out there, visit you and your children and threaten to take your kids from you. So it was definitely authority and private and power over poverty, disability, and being poor and Black.
Thank you. I'm sorry. I was going to have to cut you off. We're really wanting all of our committee members to have an opportunity to ask a question. I have just received notice that if each committee member can ask one question to one specific panelist, so that we can ensure that everyone have an opportunity to ask a question. So now I will go to Mr. Stephen Green.
Okay, I will ask one specific question to one panelist, but first say I really, really, really appreciated everybody's testimony. I'm seeing your photos, your picture. I really thank you. Thank you. Really appreciate it. So my question, a little different. One of our earlier sessions, we heard that, if I'm not mistaken, a majority of the cases in the system are actually classified as neglect, not abuse. And one thing I just honestly, on like just kind of like a logical level, don't get is like, if your problem is neglect, like how are you going to neglect some child like during, hey, you get to meet him for 2 hours? Like, how could that possibly any harm? I get abuse and I get why that needs to be monitored. But if you're saying, oh, they didn't provide good enough home or this way, and it's just like this thing of like, but wait a second, like how could this possibly go wrong? So I think, because I'm curious for Ms. Middleton's take on this, because I'm not quite sure if, you know, in your home life you were experiencing abuse or neglect or both, but you know, from your perspective, and you talked about some of the difficulties with this, just in terms of these visitations and you know, how the rules about that make sense or don't make sense, especially with situations of abuse versus neglect. So that's my question, if it makes any sense.
Yeah, so let me make sure I'm understanding your question. You're trying to understand, because there is a huge spike in terms of like the statistics around neglect for most children, trying to understand like.
Well, I guess I'm trying to understand, like, I get why you need these careful, monitored, supervised visits where there's allegations of abuse. But honestly, I don't get it when there's allegations of neglect. And I wasn't unclear from your situation whether you came from a home where it was considered abuse or neglect or both. And,
yeah, it was both.
You know, and how you felt from, you know, your perspective of these visitations, and whether they were too limited, whether the amount of oversight was appropriate, et cetera. Just kind of, you know, what your perspective on that would be.
Yeah, so it was both. Like there were some instances where the oversight, I think it was just like social worker coming in, trying to check a box and get out of there. So it was too little in terms of like her not taking enough time to really sit with my family and like see what was up. But then also I'm like, you kind of got to be strategic because my mom ain't no dummy. Like she's not going to sit here in front of you and like knock me out or like do something neglectful like while you're sitting here. You kind of got to be a little bit more mindful and strategic about that, which is hard when you're still trying to be family centered at the same time. But for the social workers who were more thorough about it, I mean, they did take that type of approach, whereas they were taking more time, even though we know like this is after hours, they're coming in and spending time in our homes and asking particular questions that won't set my mom off, but kind of like get the answers that they want. And they can kind of, you know, for the gist of it, because it's like you can kind of look at the kid and they're kind of looking at you like, help me without saying it. And so like, yeah, I just think it, for me, in my experience, it was more of the social workers who were strategic in terms of how they spent the time. And they weren't limited. It wasn't a box checking. It was more thorough.
And
Thank
if
you.
I could, the neglect, I'm sorry, let me just add this a little bit. The neglect,
Okay, if you
impli-
can take 5 minutes, please.
less than that. The neglect
Okay.
implies disability. And so when you have a disability, you have a therapeutic home, which is finance driven. And that's why I say this should be a RICO investigation, because basically the monies come in with the child who has a disability. If you look at the numbers, if they provide the numbers about the number of children who are disabled, have autism, developmentally delayed, you will find that that is high, and it's easier to prove that or to imply that the mother is unfit to care for that child's special needs. And I think that's why.
Thank you. Jonathan Guzet, your turn.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I guess I'll ask a question, if I may, to Ms. Rushing. But before I do, I just want to assure you, I do take your testimony very seriously. I've taken everybody's testimony seriously, and I find a lot of it extremely moving. But anyway, my question is, you mentioned that this all started with you made a call to DHHS that you've regretted ever since. I'm just curious, what was the call about?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Guzet, and I'm glad that you take our testimonies very seriously. The call that was reported was, if you heard my husband testify, it was sexual. It was inappropriate touching. And other things to my 10-year-old daughter. And so I made that report like I was mandated to do. And the investigation took 8 months when we know investigations should only take 30 to 45 days. So for 8 months, and not to mention home visits stopped at our home February, March. So from February, March till July, we had no home visits. Matter of fact, our house was even deemed safe. But yet and still, she took it upon herself to do what she wanted to do. Of course, we had a CFT meeting prior to that. And during the CFT meeting, we were finally going to discuss the outcome of the case. And while we're on the phone, you can tell that the father appears to be inebriated. The program manager, not taking the issue seriously, is laughing on camera. And at that point, it's like, are you not taking my situation seriously? And I had already knew that there were going to be concerns because the CAC examiner had did a exam without my permission, which is another issue. But even with that psychological evaluation that was only to take place, only with that one thing, they still did besides the forensic evaluation, they still went ahead and did another rape kit. And one thing I learned is that one, it is very hard to find any evidence when it comes to children that are sexually abused. Cases are at 0.02% where you're going to have a rape kit that will show evidence. Two, children, especially girls, heal faster than women do. Their bodies are just younger. So three, if an examiner is taking my daughter to do an exam and not telling me, like I said, that's another issue. But I'm following medical advice. If I don't do what the medical doctors tell me to do or the police officer suggests that I do, then I will be in court for delaying the report, which is what they tried to argue. And then go back and argue that I reported it too much. One incident was reported in 2018 that was substantiated that I did not even learn about until 2023. And I'll end there because it's a lot to it, Mr. Guzay.
Thank you.
Donna Oldham, you're up next.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First, let me thank all the everyone for sharing their testimony and their truths. And my question is for Ms. Hawes. And my question, Ms. Hawes, is your son receiving counseling and therapy as a sex abuse survivor?
He is currently in preparation of that. He did not want to do it early. He was willing to give the statement, but now I think after 2 years, he has agreed to therapy in addition to getting the mental health for his IEP so that he can be more successful in college. So it's all encompassed under one umbrella, how we were able to nudge him into that direction. But initially, he did not want to talk about it initially. But I think that he has a new provider, and he's a great guy. He's an African-American medical provider who they have a great connection, and I think that he worked greatly with my son to make sure that he gets all the care that he needs, and he's making sure that all the boxes are checked. So it's new, but yes, we're in the process.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I will go to Catherine Reed next.
Thank you, panelists, for your very important testimony. Really appreciate you speaking to us today. I know we have to direct it to one panelist, so I just wanted to ask maybe Mr. Campbell. When we were hearing from DHHS, Ms. Tucker Cooley, she had indicated that there was, under the new law, Ryland's law, that there had been opportunities for community engagement and for the community to impacted individuals in the community to be heard by DHHS. It doesn't sound like that has been the experience here. I just wanted to hear from you your thoughts on how DHHS could do a better job at the kind of big administrative level of listening to impacted families so that they know how to reform the system from within.
You know, that is a great and excellent question. A couple months back, actually, beginning of this year, my wife and I went to a joint planning session with the state of North Carolina, DHS. They have these every, I forgot how many years, but we were invited to come. And here's the thing. You have to teach, you have to train people different, because you have to realize that these people are trained to manipulate children. And I noticed that they need to be more aware of instances just like what happened to my family. You know, I made a comment in that session when I was invited, and I stated, you know, say when a child commits a crime, right? Your first thing you're supposed to do is what? contact their parents if they're underage because they don't want them talking to them by themselves. I mentioned that in DSS cases. I had a director from a small county here in North Carolina basically laugh off my question, and he's a director, and shun it. Oh, well, that's it with that question. So there needs to be more checks and balances in place. And you don't have that with 100 counties. I mean, we have 100 counties in North Carolina. The biggest state of California does not even have 100 counties. You know, you heard the director speak last week that they're divided into 7 regions. And then she wants to really wanted to elude all questions and try to take it back to a PowerPoint presentation that still held no accountability. The first thing that North Carolina has to do, and the director of the state of North Carolina DHS, you have to take accountability. Just like there are road police officers, there's road DSS officers. But here's the difference. The moment that a police officer kills an unarmed individual, it goes viral. But the moment that a child who we should be protecting gets taken from a home, which is legalized kidnapping, let's be clear, it gets no coverage. I literally had to get kicked out of a board meeting in April to get our story across. Because if you looked at the video, and as stated before, I'm going to send more information. But at the end of that video, you will hear that I even urged the state to come in. I met Josh Stein, our current Attorney General. Every week, I'm canvassing for Josh Stein. But every week, I'm calling his office and leaving messages saying, guess what? You still have a job to do as Attorney General. Because let me be honest with you. Your counterpart, who you're running against, has sat with people that we have sent up to Raleigh. He at least listened to what happened. I need that same accountability for you. So I hold the state of North Carolina all on trial. That is what I'm going to do. And they have to take accountability because even last week, you still see they don't want to take accountability. And that was from the state directive.
Thank you, Mr. Campbell. Gregory Wallace, you're up next.
Yes, I again, as everybody else has said, thank you for all of the witnesses for showing up here today and offering your testimony. I want to direct my question to Ms. Middleton. If there is one thing that you could change about the current system, what would that be?
That's a hard one because there's not just one. Of course, I'm sure all y'all know that. But if I did have to just, like in this case, just cite one thing that I would change about it, I do feel like for the kids that are in care, like for whatever reason they got to be there, we need to have more like activities for them to do. Because when I say that, I'm talking about like, I don't know if any of y'all are familiar with Say So. It stands for Strong Abled Youth Speaking Out, and it's a youth-led organization. I've been involved with it since I was 12 years old. And organizations like that give young people outlet. Like when I went to Say So, I was riding horses for the first time, kayaking, canoeing, rock climbing, like just like traveling. I was doing a lot of stuff that, my foster parents didn't have time. So, I mean, keep it a stack. It's hard for regular parents to just, take our kids out sometimes. But I appreciated that organization because it gave me the out to be able to do the things that my social worker or my foster parents didn't have the time to do with me. But also gave me a space to talk to other young people about what we are going through, like whether it be in our foster home, our social worker, with our parents, whatever. It's just this safe, real space because we invest in this peer-to-peer framework in Say So. And so when I talk to these young people, if like unanimously in talking to them, like I said, I'm still involved with Say So, and I have been since I was 12, unanimously across the board, they're alone. A lot of them are very, very deeply lonely. and they need a space. And so I just feel like there needs to be an investment, more of an investment too by the state financially into these type of programs. I mean, you have say so, you've got other, youth spaces, and the state just really needs to start to invest in that. And then to tag on that a little bit more, there needs to be a huge investment in having more social workers that understand, again, like this family-centered concept, like, because like was mentioned up here, a lot of times the people see like the child as their own entity or the children as their own entity, and then you see the parents and they're a family. Even though I didn't live with my mom for a long time, I still love that lady. And I still consider her my family, and all my siblings and all that, and my cousins and aunts and all that. And so I feel like there needs to be an investment in more like social workers being trained, which we have those resources. If you look to the Center for Family and Community Engagement, like the state financially investing in them to have more social work trainers to train social workers on how to be more family-centered when they're working with families and consider the family as a unit and not as divided entities.
All right, thank you very much. I would like to thank everyone again, all of our panelists, for presenting at today's web briefing and for the committee's engagement. We will now transition to public comment. We have a very short amount of time. We did want everyone to have the opportunity to share their comments. We will now transition to public comment if we run out of time and members of the public are interested in sharing their comments. Please remember we will continue to accept written testimony until September 23rd at lschiller@usccr.gov. As a reminder to committee members, we will have a brief business meeting. Before we begin public comment, I'd like to remind committee members that this is an opportunity for us to hear from the public. This is not a space to engage in discussion or substantive questions. If a committee member needs to make a clarifying question as of a public commenter, please raise your hand, and we will decide at that point whether you are allowed to ask your question. Please note that USCCR is not an enforcement agency, and the committee's primary task is to send recommendations to the Commission on civil rights topics. The public comment section is intended for any member of the public to share their thoughts or experiences with us related to the topic at hand. This is not a Q&A session. We're required to obtain the legal names of anyone providing public comment. To provide a comment, please raise your hand in Zoom. You will have 3 minutes and will be given a heads up when your time is almost up. Please do refrain from degrading anyone. If needed, we may intervene to redirect the comment to the topic at hand. After a warning, the chair has the right to mute anyone. Also, please know that if you have previously shared comments, we will prioritize those who have not had an opportunity to speak. I now call on staff to assist with public comments. Staff will call on and inform members of the public when to unmute.
Thank you, members of the public, for joining. At this time, I see that there are 2 folks who have raised their hands. I will go ahead and call on Angela Burton, who will be our first speaker. And if I can invite Liliana to bring up the timer, and she will signal when you may begin.
Hi, good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good afternoon. I appreciate the committee's deliberations and having this opportunity to highlight this particular issue. My name is Angela Burton. I am an attorney in New York. I was engaged very insistently and diligently with the New York committee investigating the impact of child welfare, family policing on Black children in New York State. Mr. Gadsden's question earlier about whether the disparities and disproportionalities or targeting that we see in the system have to do with either institutional racism, systemic issues, or individual prejudices and impact, I think it's the wrong question. The question is, the answer is clearly that it's both. But the larger question and the larger answer is that the system is designed in order to encourage and facilitate the targeting of vulnerable and marginalized communities. I would really encourage the committee to take a look at the report that was issued by the New York State Committee, which outlines the history of the CPS system as it is embodied and codified in federal law under the Child Abuse Prevention and Treatment Act of 1974, which is infamously celebrating 50 years of impact on children and families, particularly Black families, Indigenous families, poor families, families affected by disabilities, and understanding from that larger perspective how it is that all of these various horrendous experiences are happening because there is no accountability built into the system. This system ignores the civil rights of children and families and allows unchecked abuse of discretion and power in individuals, and the system is designed that way. So I would highly encourage the committee to take a look at the New York State Committee report, which has voluminous sites and references to other informations that will help you understand the larger context in which these horrendous experiences and outcomes are happening. Thank you very much for your attention and your time.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Martha Grice Haney. I'm sorry if I butchered your last name. You may begin.
You actually said my last name correctly. I was just I have actually I'm a grandmother and a school teacher. I'm also a licensed foster caregiver, and I was called one morning to go pick up my grandson because my niece had given birth to a son, and he was born exposed to drugs. So I was up on my way to go get my grandson, and got a call from another CPS worker that was actually the adoption supervisor that said that I could not go get my grandson. And I have been fighting for 4 years to try to get my grandson back. And I have been so horrified at the system because I am a good person. I have never neglected, never abused. I work with children every single day and advocate for them. And the lies that social workers and officials that work with our children are allowed to tell so that they can pad their cases is just horrendous. So I beg for the system to actually look at trying to put some sort of accountability into the system so that these lies are not allowed to persist. Also, I beg for you to look at where the money is going, because I believe that the reason why the social worker did not want to give me my child, because CPS called me and told me to go get the child. The social worker that was in charge of adoption called me and told me, no, we've already found a placement for that child. Well, what I believe she was doing is she was placing that child with a family to adopt that child. And she told me on the phone, because I told her I'm going up there to go get my grandchild. And she said, if I put that grandchild with you, I'm not going to give you any money. And later on, I found out that if you put children with their biological family members, DSS does not get money for that child. They get money when they're placed with licensed foster care providers. So I beg of you to follow the money and see where the money is being placed, because I think what DSS is doing is they are putting these children with strangers because they get more money from the federal government to put these children with those strangers. And that's all I need to say. Just please take our children into account because they have families that love them.
Thank you for your comment. Our next speaker is Amanda Wallace. Amanda, you may begin.
Thank you. So this has been a powerful 2 months of testimony on the issue of family policing. Throughout the panels, the committee has heard from those most impacted by this issue, and I want to affirm these experiences because experience trumps data any day, especially when the data is flawed and hidden behind the veil of confidentiality that this system has created. But this committee is now in a position to go to work to support families in North Carolina, and you have two paths. You can go down the same path that has been followed for centuries to give the system more money and train their workers and hope for the best. Or you can go down a path of abolition, where this state divests from this harmful system and invests in communities. The second path is the only way forward, the only path that will free the children currently trapped in this system and prevent more families from falling victim. But what we hope this committee understands is that this system is not about protecting children, but instead is simply a money-making scheme, a scheme that lines the pockets of those working for this system. It's unfortunate that society believes that this system gives children a chance. A chance at what? A chance of life without their family or connections to their foundation? You can't give a child a chance without investing in the whole family. We often hear about substance use and domestic violence, which are not root causes, but instead consequences of a society who invests in the destruction of families versus investment in families. But in closing, I really want to raise up Tyeva Pollard's name, a child who this committee has heard of time and time again. A child who was kidnapped in New Hanover County when she has generations of family who were and are still willing to care for her. Again, this committee has heard from her family. Tyeva should be home. And when this committee is thinking of recommendations, think about this child, this family, because the recommendations should create a pathway to free her. Families, stay strong, stay vocal, and keep fighting this system. Your voice matters in this fight, and your collective voice is what is needed to dismantle this system, the system that is rooted in slavery and the continuation of the sale of children. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Our next speaker is Bashira McDaniel. You may begin.
Imagine going to the hospital for help only to have your child taken away, even though you went voluntarily to check on your own well-being. Imagine spending 2 years fighting in court to prove that your mental health is clear. Imagine the doctors confirming your well-being, but CPS still overriding their expertise. Imagine having a loving, supportive family, an ample amount of friends who stand by you, only to be dismissed and excluded from the court proceedings. Imagine all of this happening simply because you sought help for yourself. Ironically, if I had chosen to ignore my own needs, I might have never experienced this ordeal. The documents even said that my child appeared healthy and cared for. Reporters wrote that my child was taken, when she was taken, that there was nothing wrong with her. Why was my child gone from me for 2 years? Why was my baby put in foster care? Why was the law ignored, family over fosters? Why was she passed around from unstable home to unstable home when I had provided ample resources of true family support? Why does she have to go through the trauma of being torn from her mother and be confused like this? And that's what hurts the most, thinking of what she was going through. And of the many stories I've heard and my own experience, it appears that this family policing system doesn't want to take accountability when they make mistakes. The pain of knowing what my daughter went through, the confusion she must have felt, it cuts deep. To add insult to injury throughout my fight, I had social workers fabricate entire stories to make a case against me. To this day, this is still flabbergasting. This is not a rare experience. They're known to lie all around. I missed my baby girl's first step. I missed her first birthday. I miss countless precious moments that can never be recaptured, and we are still healing. These scars run deep, emotional, and psychological. It's crucial that social workers be held accountable for their actions. There needs to be a system in place to investigate allegations of misconduct and ensure that they are not lying. CPS often makes mistakes when it's clear that a child is safe and well cared for. They should not be kept in foster care simply because it's the easiest option. They need to take responsibility for their errors and prioritize the best interest of the child for real. That's all I need to say.
Thank you for your comment. We have time for one more speaker, and that's Christina Laster. Christina, once the timer is up, you may begin. Thank you, and that concludes public comment.
All right, I would like to thank all the committee members and members of the public who participated today. Please email any written testimony and any questions regarding today's briefing to L. Schiller, LSHILLER @usccr.gov. We plan to have a fifth panel in September. Please visit the committee's project page or the Federal Register to be notified of this meeting. We hope you are able to join. Thank you, all members of the public. You are invited to stay on the business meeting portion of today's proceeding. We will now go into our business section. I would first like to announce that Patrick Mency resigned his committee membership due to scheduling conflicts and professional commitments to his clients. We're receiving a lot of written testimony and supplemental information, so please be sure to review them when you have time. There's lots of information on monday.com. Let's see. Panel 5, we did have a few people that suggested members, well, people that could be invited as panelists. Stephen Green suggested that we hear from a prospective judge. Marcus agreed with Stephen. Mercedes, who is not present currently, suggested that we reach out to a juvenile certification judge. Jennifer Lechner, who I do apologize, I did not have an opportunity to call on her for her question. She had to leave. She did suggest Judge Ashley Parker in Wake County as a possible panelist. John Guzet hadn't heard from anyone, but he had reached out. Thank you, John, for your efforts. And Catherine suggested that social workers who are first point of contact be a part of that, of our panel if possible. We typically allow 30 days following the business meeting to accept written comment related.
Chair Wright, this is Anna
Yeah.
speaking. If I can interrupt, I can provide some updates regarding
Okay.
panelists because I've done some preliminary outreach to them.
Thank you very
I've reached out to Judge Ashley Parker, who is available to participate in a fifth briefing. I've also reached out to Ginger Rhodes, who's with Ray's Foster Reform Coalition. She is also available to present. I believe she's the founder of the organization. And so that would satisfy two of those missing perspectives that members had requested in the last meeting. Both are, and as you all know, we polled you for your availability for a fifth panel. We narrowed down the dates, and it looks like the majority of members who are available, and along with the panelists who are available, they can present and we can host a fifth briefing on September 27th at 12 to 1:30 p.m. And so as a matter of formality, we would like for the committee to vote to approve the panelists as well as the date to hold that fifth panel. And so I'll just leave it to you, Chair, if you want to open up for a quick discussion. We have a couple minutes, or if members would like to move to accept the date and approve those panelists.
Yeah, thank you, Anna. Sorry for that, moving at a train's pace. If there's any committee member that has an issue or would like to discuss September 27th or any discussion concerning the panelists that Anna discussed, I will open up for discussion at this time.
I'll go ahead if I may. First of all, thank you, Anna. And that all sounds great for September 27th, I will say. Also wanted to note that with regards to what you said for September 27th, you suggested a 90-minute meeting rather than a 2.5-hour meeting, which sounds great to me. We've invested a lot of time. We've heard a lot of voices. And again, I know many of them are still on this call and I appreciate it so much. But, especially with public comment, not that I haven't gotten a lot out of public comment, but it's just awful story after awful story. Honestly, and that's what would happen again if we had another half hour or hour of public comment on September 27th. So, I don't know if we have to have some or not, but at this point, I'm really looking forward to hearing, especially the judge's perspective, but do appreciate the idea in theory of keeping things a little briefer. I'll be honest. Yeah.
Any other discussion?
Chair Wright, I saw that I assume it's the legislative aide for Representative Donnie Loftus. I see that they were on the call today, and it just reminded me that, we're really trying to get a representative in the state legislature who's, worked on Ryland's Law or is invested in the child welfare system as sort of a focal point of their legislative work. And so I just wanted to lift that up again, and maybe starting with Representative Loftus might be a good opportunity. But I'm a support of everything else, the date and everything.
Okay, now Anna, I'm going to reach out to you because you will need time to reach out to the representative. Would that have any effect on September 27th?
Oh, it would absolutely change, considering, and you know, I wanted to discuss this at the next briefing. I wanted to go over your timeline, but just in short, we have a very tight timeline to complete, you know, a review of the testimony and, you know, have enough time for the committee to debrief what you've heard, review the material, and then draft a report based on that information. So as much as possible, and we've provided in the past some timeline on when to submit recommendations for panelists. And so I suppose as a way to kind of reconcile with that, we can reach out to the representative to submit written testimony so that we can receive that particular perspective, if that is fine with the committee, instead of having a live testimony.
Yes,
Because
Don.
we do have to wrap up our oral the testimony that we receive after. Well, this next one has to be the final one.
John.
Well, Anne, I just wondered if you could ask him if he could be there on the 27th. And
Exactly.
then
I was going to say,
Exactly.
if not, go for written testimony.
Certainly, we can do that. I can do that.
All right. Any other discussion? All right, hearing none, I will make a motion that we continue with our fifth panel discussion on September 27th between the hours of 12 and 1:30. All in favor? Aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? Okay, I have a net. Okay, hearing no opposition, I will move that the panel discussion for our fifth panel will be held on September 27th between the hours of 12 and 1:30. Next, we will vote. I will make a and I did not ask for a second.
I'll be the second on that, Chair.
Thank you. Trying to get through it. Okay, thank you. I will make a motion on for the two panelists that Anna discussed, Judge Parker, and I don't recall the second name. May I have a second? Thank you, John. And now, all in favor, aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing no opposition, we will move forward with Anna reaching out to the two panelists that we just approved for her to reach out to. And I don't know if we need to stop now, Anna, or move forward with the deadline period. So we just
We
stop
can,
here.
yeah, and we can stop now, but I do want to, I noticed that Representative Loftus raised, is in the, I'm wondering if we could just cut straight to the outreach right now, if it's possible, with the 2 minutes that we have left. So I'm going to go ahead and unmute Representative here just to ask availability, if that's fine with everyone with the 2 minutes we have left.
Yes, so we can at least know his availability.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Representative Loftus. Thank you for coming on.
This is a very critical issue that my office is focused on. I will make myself available to support this and submit written testimony or information. And if possible, I would certainly like to be included in a in-person get-together September. I would be honored to be there. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, very much. So Anna, we have three. So we will have three panels. Is that correct now?
Yes, it'll be a very tight schedule. So I will reach out to your office, Representative. Thank you.
Chair, I'd like to move to accept Mr. Representative Loftus to be at that next panel.
I second. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, we will include Representative Loftus in our panel discussion to total a total of three panelists for that discussion to be held on September 27th. I'm looking at my time. We're going to run out of time. We have got 1 minute. Is there any, and thank everyone for your questions, for your attentiveness. And for those panelists, thank you for everything that you're continuing to do. And we all, I'm sure, wish you the best of luck in your endeavors. And the time reaching 3:30, I will now adjourn this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Enjoy your
Thank
weekend,
you.
everyone.
Thank you, you too.